Hello, it's Mark and welcome back to No Book Left Behind. And what are we doing today? Oh, it's my October reading roundup. Typical, got interrupted. And look at that, that's just arrived in the post as I was starting to record. Right at the moment I was starting to record and did that first little intro there. So yeah, let's open it up and see what it is. This isn't going to have anything to do with the rest of the video, but as it's here, let's do it. Might as well. What have I ordered? It's probably got nothing to do with books. Well, I'll always cut this bit out, can't I? Oh, it is a book. Oh, and how appropriate it is! This looks so staged, but it's not. It's related to the first book I was about to talk about in relation to my October reading roundup. So let's get on with it, and I'll just pull this out at the appropriate moment, which is just going to be in a couple of minutes. Right. I can't get over that, I really can't. As I say, it seems dreadfully staged, but it's not, honestly. Anyway, let's get this show on the road. Let's get it straight. Let's try and be professional, Mark. Oh yeah, like, subscribe and ring the notification bell and all those YouTube things. Okay, right. So that bit's done. So let's get back to October and what I actually read in October. And of course, it was Halloween and spooky month, and I love spooky months. And I did my Halloween 48-hour reading marathon, which is a previous video, which I think I posted last week. In the last week, obviously, because that was Halloween. And so obviously the first few books that I'm going to talk about today actually were part of that reading roundup. So apologies if you've already seen me talk about these a little bit. I won't be saying exactly the same things, but it won't exactly be a revelation either. So yes, you can basically skip this bit and go to the second half of the video if you like. Maybe I'll put a date stamp in there. There you go, a time stamp even. God, I am talking a lot today. Okay, let's get on with the books. Now, the first one I read, in fact, let's not do them in order because they're not in order on the table. And oh, yes. My God, I'm rambling today. I've got a table now. So if you've actually watched these videos before, you may have noticed me refer occasionally to a step ladder that's out of shot where the books are stacked. Well, I've actually got a little table now. So yes, that's an improvement to the service there. So let's talk about the 5 books I read for my Halloween reading marathon. Now, the first one on the pile, appropriately enough as it turns out, is the British Library's Tales of the Weird, The Platform Edge, which was an anthology of uncanny tales about the railways. And this is a quality anthology of short stories. I really did enjoy this a lot. My 2 favourites, firstly, was Edgar Wallace's The Barford Snake. Edgar Wallace, if you've never heard of him, wrote about 170 novels in the first part of the 20th century, and also contributed to the screenplay to King Kong, the 1933 original movie. I was only familiar really with Wallace, not through his written work, but through movies, because in the mid-60s there was a whole slew of Euro crime movies based on his books. Some of them starred Klaus Kinski, some of them starred Christopher Lee, which is where I'm aware of them from, because I'm a big Christopher Lee fan and I've been sort of trawling through all the movies I can of his. So that's where I knew Edgar Wallace's name from. And there was nothing in those movies that really kind of sparked my interest enough to buy any of his books. The reason there were so many of those films suddenly coming out of Germany and Europe in the 1960s was that Edgar Wallace's son, also named Edgar, actually offered the rights really, really cheap to lots of film producers with the idea that it would kickstart popularity in the books again, which had kind of fallen off. And it worked. It really did work, apparently. It was a big success. So kudos to him there. The movies aren't particularly great, but they aren't particularly bad either. So I was kind of surprised how good The Barford Snake was as a story. I really did like it. Don't know if it quite inspires me to buy any more of his work, or to try any of his work rather, but yeah, I might do if I come across something that I think think might work. Possibly. Anyway, the other outstanding story, and the one that really grabbed me, was by a British author called R. Chetwynd Hayes, who I was only familiar with through another movie, The Monster Club from 1980, which was a horror anthology with John Carradine and Vincent Price. Not a great movie, but I did know his name through that. So when I got to that story, I didn't have any particular high expectations for it. It's called The Underground, but I thought it was brilliant. I really love that story, and it inspired me to buy some R. Chetwynd Hayes, or to try some of his stuff. Now this is where we go on to this, because, would you believe, this is a book by Mr. Hayes. The Unbidden, a collection of short stories from the early 1970s. So that was why I was laughing, that it was quite appropriate that just as I started to make the video here, and the first book I was going to talk about was actually going to mention his name, and then I hear the post box go and this book by him drops on the doormat. So yeah, that's quite cool. I may review it at some point. Obviously, I don't really know yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it very much after reading The Underground. Now, moving on from that strange coincidence, the other books I did in my Halloween marathon. The first is back to movies again, because it was Countess Dracula by Michel, which is a Hammer horror movie novelisation tie-in, which I enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I think it's a decent Hammer movie. They were getting a bit hit and miss in the early 70s with budgetary constraints and things. They'd lost their distribution rights in America, which really did affect the studio in a negative way. But the movie, I do think, is a decent movie, and it's a decent and very efficient, solid novelisation of it. It's very little different from the film. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a quick and easy read. After that, I tackled Ghostland by Colin Dickey, which is a factual examination of ghost stories all across America. Basically, why we tell ghost stories, how we tell them, how the original facts have been somewhat adapted over time to fit common tropes and needs. Interestingly, he talks about, among many other things, he talks about the monetization of ghosts and the dark tourism that we now have. That's quite interesting. And yeah, the whole thing, a lot of food for thought in this one. I really did enjoy it. I would recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. It's not academic, it's very accessible. If you're into ghosts, you'll probably enjoy it. You just have to remember he's not trying to prove the existence or disprove the existence of the supernatural in individual cases. He talks about individual hauntings, but only in respect of how of the things I've mentioned, basically, not of whether they were real or not. So that was that one. I enjoyed that a lot. In a similar vein was Paul Barber's Vampires, Burials and Death, which is examining the original folklore of the vampire. This was kind of disappointing, not because the book's disappointing in any way or flawed in any way, but simply because the mythology is disappointing, because really there isn't anything very consistent about it. There's not... it was most interesting, in fact, for the things that are not part of folklore when it comes to the vampire. There's, for example, give you some off the top of my head. There are no fangs. There's no lying on soil in a coffin. Basically, there has to be from your native land. There's none of that. There's no fear of crosses. Crosses basically don't get mentioned. A lot of the things that we currently kind of associate with the vampire, daylight being destructive, for example, this is all just stuff that's either come through Bram Stoker's original Dracula novel or stuff that's just sort of evolved over time within popular culture. It's just none of it is actually relates at all to the folklore, really, which is basically about our ancestors' lack of knowledge of what happens when a body decomposes, and also how contagious disease works. because plagues were often blamed on vampires, especially if the first person in the village died young and unexpected, and then other people died subsequently. It was never thought that it was a disease or anything like that. No, it was a vampire, and so bodies were exhumed and staked or beheaded, burnt, or just very destroyed in a variety of ways, depending on which part of Europe you were from. Which is, as I say, there is no real consistency to the folklore of the vampire. It's just all basically superstitions and things gathered from in different places, which have commonalities but have a lot of differences too. So there is no real folkloric focused myth of the vampire, and so that was inevitably a bit disappointing to me anyway. I thought there might be something, but not really. No. And there's also a very unpleasant chapter which goes into how bodies decompose. So if you're into that sort of thing, that's there for you. I didn't enjoy it much. There you are. But the book is decent and it's interesting. Certainly if you're interested in the subject, I'd recommend it. The last book that I did as part of my Halloween reading marathon was The Spirit of the Town by Todd Robbins. And if you're not familiar with Mr. Robbins, he was the guy who wrote the short story that the movie Freaks was based on, which was so controversial back in 1932, was actually banned in the UK for decades. And sadly, because the studio lost its nerve before it was released, a lot of it was cut out, so it's not really a complete movie. Certainly not the original director's intention anyway. I think about half an hour of it maybe even is missing, that was just never shown, apart from in previews, which ironically were very positive. But the business of using real circus freaks, that's not the politically acceptable word obviously these days, but that using those people in the movie, it really proved too controversial for its time, and would be controversial now, I think, as well. Anyway, that was Todd Robbins. That's what Todd Robbins is known for, if he's known for anything. But this was his first book, The Spirit of the Town, a novel presentation in fiction form of the impulse and desire which mould the lives of men. And this is a very self-righteous, I'm afraid, very dated book. It's about a guy who leaves his small town to go to the big evil apple of New York and falls in with the wrong crowd, if you like, kind of. And it's basically about how all pleasure and having a good time leads to sin and destitution in the gutter. Really, if you were being unkind, you could say that. It's very black and white in its moral stance on things. I don't think Mr. Robbins would be much fun at parties, put it that way. But it was very readable. I got through it in a couple of hours, so I mean it was a very quick read, and it's not without merit, but it is very dated. So those were the 5 books that I did in my Halloween reading marathon. I've spent a lot more time talking about those than I thought I would. Now, the other 5 books I got round to, because there was actually 10 this month, which is a lot for me. In fact, it might even be a personal best. Mostly because of the reading marathon, of course. But the other 5, well, 4 of those are from my TBR, which you may have seen in my TBR video for October. So I got 4 of them done out of 8, so it wasn't too bad. The first of those was Walter Mosley's Rose Gold, which is the 13th instalment in his Easy Roll-In saga, which I do love. I love the character. I love the from the ground up alternate version of American history, if you like, seeing it from the point of view of both a black man and someone who's not really at the top of the food chain. He's not doing so bad by the time we get to Rose Gold, but yeah, he's still not really accepted in high society or anything like that, obviously. This is a very good book. I really did enjoy this a lot. I was absorbed and gripped by this. Sometimes with Mosley's work I feel there's a flaw in that his plots aren't that great. This one I felt was better and stronger because of it. I don't really normally mind that, really, because I'm in love with the character and kind of the whole ambience of it. So that doesn't bother me too much if the plot isn't a cracker. But this was one of the better ones from that point of view as well. So yeah, a recommendation for me if you're... I mean, you don't need it if you're into Walter Mosley and you've already read any of the Easy Rollins books. You don't need me to recommend them. But if you haven't, well, you should. Next up, there's another movie tie-in novelisation, And this one was a bit different because this is from 1978 and this is the Doug McClure classic Warlords of Atlantis, here novelised by a guy called Paul Victor. And I really did enjoy this. The movie is not one of my particular favourites. I prefer the slightly earlier McClure adventures like The Land of Time Forgotten, At the Earth's Core. This book is actually better than the film in a way because it opens the story out a little. I mean, they aren't radical additions, but I did like a couple of... Certainly, there's an extended sequence when they're actually in Atlantis and how he describes what Atlantis is in terms of its society. They weren't able to really show that in the movie because of budgetary constraints. And there is one quite long scene action sequence which would have been great if it had been in the film. I don't know whether those extra things were shot for the film or whether they were just part of the original script and just thrown out immediately because they'd be too expensive to do. I'm not sure. I'm 50-50 on that possibility, to be honest. But yeah, I really did enjoy that, and that is well worth a read. And in terms of Lost World literature, it's probably better than anything else I've read so far that I've reviewed for the channel, which seems a bit ironic in a way. And talking of which, yes, I also tackled Edward S. Ellis's The Land of Mystery, which is more Lost World literature, which, well, it's from 1901. I'd actually say a Lost World literature was pushing it a bit because the world that it takes place in, which is a tribal society in the Amazon, well, it isn't very lost, really, to be honest. And there aren't many kind of interesting elements to it anyway. It's very much a kind of adventure novel, really. To say it's Lost World literature is pushing the definition a bit, but I still will review it as part of that thread, but I did find it quite disappointing. The last two books I got around to this month were both autobiographies, funnily enough. The first was on my TBR, and that was Ian Ogilvy's Once a Saint. And if you're not familiar with Ian Ogilvy, he's an English actor, mostly on TV, but he did do some movies, quite a few, and mostly active in the 60s and 70s, I think you could say was his heyday. This is a lot of fun. Ogilvy is a very good host. I didn't realise he actually is a best-selling children's author these days. I did not know that. But yeah, he's a very genial host. He's very honest, I feel, as much as he wants to be anyway, about his own professional and personal shortcomings, as well as dropping a lot of fun anecdotes about working in the business. I really did enjoy this, and I think Mr. Ogilvy would be quite nice company. I think hanging out with him would be a lot of fun, by judging by this book. Yeah, I'd recommend that, even if you're not particularly a fan of Mr. Ogilvy's work or don't even know who he is. He was basically most famous, I guess, for playing the Saint in a TV show, Return of the Saint, which was the follow-up to the original Roger Moore one. And he also appeared in Witchfinder General, which is a classic movie. Yeah, so I'd recommend that if it sounds interesting. The other autobiography I read was this one, Don't Tell Anybody the Secrets I Told You, by American musician Lucinda Williams. I am a big Lucinda Williams fan, so I was always going to get round to this. Mostly it's a tale of persistence. She does talk about her difficult upbringing a bit, but it doesn't dwell on it. She does talk about how it unconsciously inspired some of her songs. But mostly it's a tale, as I say, of persistence. She made her first record for a small folk label when she was 26. 20 years later, she had her final breakout and made it, if you like, hit the big time. So that was when she was in her mid-40s, obviously. So, yeah, it took her a long, long time. But yeah, I do love her music. The book is a good, breezy read. I think... probably for fans only. The uninitiated wouldn't find it too interesting, I don't think, because there's not anything in here which really kind of elevates it beyond but elevates it beyond the a struggle for popularity, a struggle for notoriety, rather, a struggle for success in the music business. It's a good read. It's a good read. If you want a music recommendation for Lucinda Williams, listen to Essence, her 2001 album. That's one of my favourite records ever. So yeah, so I was always going to read this. So that's it for my reading roundup for October. It's a bit chaotic. I feel I digressed a huge amount from things, as usual. No, I don't think I do that too badly usually, do I? Probably. Anyway, right, that's enough of that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell and all that jazz. And remember, keep scouring those dusty second-hand bookshelves, because there's some treasures waiting out there just for you to find. Cheers.